Hello and welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Midlam Miniatures is a UK based company that I know primarily for their lovely old school metal miniatures. You know, the kind of miniatures that give you that warm nostalgic old Hammer or Ralpartha feeling. But what I didn't realise is they also happen to make board games, and recently they contacted me to ask if I would like to review the newest edition of their unusually named and instantly intriguing Stalagbite. Stalagbite, a game for 1 to 6 players in which dwarves delve in dark dungeons for glory and treasure, actually dates back to 2011, and the game has been through several iterations over the years. But in 2024, following a successful Kickstarter, Midlam Miniatures' vision was finally realised in a glorious full-colour boxed game, with all new components and brand new gameplay elements. And just look at this cover art. That is wonderful. If you were in any doubt what the name of the game might mean, this art tells you everything you need to know, as 2 wary dwarves enter a chamber filled with the titular creatures. And don't those stalagmites look happy to have something new to chew? I think this is just fabulous. It immediately caught my attention. It made me want to go on an adventure with these dwarves and find out what these creatures are. And it let me know I wasn't necessarily going to be getting your standard hack and slash dungeon plunger. Indeed, I don't think anything about this game is standard, and the sterling presentation doesn't end at the box art. Components are on the small side. Individual hex tokens are 1¼ inches point to point, and round tokens are 1 inch across, and in any one game you will find at most 5 of these large size caverns. But nothing here feels like it's small to be cheap. All the tokens and tiles are a good thickness and easy to manipulate, and you get heaps of them. All the artwork is clear and instantly understandable. There are super adorable custom meeples for dwarves, goblins, stalagmites and other nefarious foes, and even absolutely gorgeous custom dice. As a bit of a dice nut, I fell in love with these instantly. They're flippin' lovely. Or rolling lovely, I suppose. Oh, and if the wooden meeples aren't doing it for you, it won't surprise you to know that Midlam Miniatures do a full range of sculpts so you can explore the caverns in style. To be clear, while at first it seemed the components were quite small, in play the compact scale of the game works to its advantage. The board never sprawls to the point where it's not easy to quickly read the lay of the land, the dwarven team never gets too spread out unless they are actively trying to split up, and really, it's just nice to play a dungeon crawler where you aren't constantly in fear of your game spilling over the edge of the table. Setting up my first game, preparing the cavern, I was delighting in every aspect of the design. The boards have a lovely, almost nostalgic aesthetic. I immediately thought of the Sorcerer's Cave and Caverns Deep. A lot of the artwork, particularly on the relic cards, also has a little of that old school D&D flavour. The sort of thing that just grabs you by the scruff of the neck and says, "Get your boots on, we're going on a quest." But what exactly is that quest? Stalagbite is, in essence, a very simple game. Admittedly, I found the rules book a little cumbersome. Some of the formatting made it a little harder to learn than it needed to be, but it is a very simple game. Simple in that really good let's play just one more time kind of way. In fact, I would say this game has been a bit of a revelation and has generated some of my best gaming experiences of 2024. It's absolutely delightful. Players each take on the role of a dwarf in an expedition, exploring forgotten caverns in search of treasure and glory. They get a meeple in their preferred colour, along with a matching reference card, a card showing their starting toughness of 7, 1 purple cube representing glory, and 1 of those stunning dice. Then they get 2 skill cards from a deck of 50. These are powerful abilities that can aid them on their quest, but often under very specific circumstances. Such skills are either single use or ongoing. For example, this ongoing skill lets you move 1 additional space when running, while this single use ability lets you block all damage from a single source. In a campaign, single-use abilities refresh between games. Players get to keep 1 of the skills they've been dealt, or instead they can discard them both and increase their toughness by 1. Toughness is the number of wounds they take before they die, so increasing toughness is often a good call. After drawing skills, each player draws 2 relic cards and keeps 1. These are the mystical artifacts of the ancient dwarf holds, powerful yet fragile and prone to crumbling to dust at a second's notice. As with skills, there are ongoing and single-use relics, and they fall into 4 categories: helms, axes, cloaks, and boots. You can never have more than 1 of each type of relic, and should you ever draw a relic type that matches one you already have, your current relic disintegrates and you take the new one in its place, even if you don't want to. even if it's dun 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 cursed. With the team ready, it's time to create the cavern. Exactly how you do this depends on what level of the cavern system you are entering and the number of players, but what you see here is the setup for 1 to 4 players in a level 1 cavern, which is recommended for your first game. This cavern has an entry point where the dwarves arrive, 5 caves, 1 of which contains a passage to a new cavern, and 4 which could contain anything from a monster's lair to a valuable crystal. Rock spaces on the cavern each get a rock token, and any skull spaces get a monster appropriate to the level of the dungeon. For levels 1 and 2, that's a Stalagbite. For levels 3 and 4, it's a Creeping Jeeper, and for levels 5 and 6, it's a Red Hook Horror. These monsters all have their own custom dice and their own special rules. You will have to fight them throughout the game, but that's not really why you're here. You're here for treasure. So in turn order, starting with the party leader, you place your dwarves in the cavern. They can go on any open space that has an unblocked path to the entrance tile. They cannot be placed on rocks or caves, and cannot share a space with another dwarf. We are almost ready to begin, we just need to prepare the goblin hunting deck. I absolutely love this part of the game. The size of the hunting deck varies based on the number of players, and in a campaign your actions in the previous game may result in cards being added or taken away. For the first game with 2 to 4 players, you draw 7 random hunting cards and place them face down on the oversized goblin arrival card. As you play, certain events will force you to flip these cards to represent the goblins closing in on you, and each card will affect the game in some way. Sometimes cards will get added or taken away from the stack, but ultimately, if you dawdle for too long in the caverns, the hunting deck will run out. Finally, if you want to, draw a cavern card. This card adds a special rule for the caverns in this game. For your first game, you may want to skip this. It will just make things a little easier and reduce the number of rules you need to remember. Gameplay itself plays out in rounds, starting with the leader rolling the event dice. This results in one of 6 events, sometimes good things like the dwarves gaining glory or health, sometimes bad things like monster ambushes. But there are 2 really interesting results that will shape the gaming experience and inform how the dwarves proceed. First is sense. The dwarves' instincts kick in and they may each secretly look at one unrevealed cave or rock token in the cavern they are in. And this is probably a good point to mention that while the dwarves are all on the same side, they are still competing. This is a race for glory and treasure, to be the top dwarf and win bragging rights over everyone else. But the dwarves are still a team, and they do rely on each other. Cooperative games that still have a competitive element and an overall winner are, in my experience, difficult to get right. The game will often give you the chance to screw over other players, but when you do, it results in a failure for the whole team. Or if one player looks like they are going to lose, they will actively stop helping the team so nobody can win. But Stalagbite does it perfectly. Each dwarf is trying to get as much glory and treasure as possible, so there is an incentive to rush off on your own and grab every bit of loot you can, and you can bet you can steal kills, snatching the glory for landing the killing blow on a monster someone else has softened up for you. But at the same time, the rules incentivize you to help other players. Rescue someone from a pit? Gain a glory point. Heal them so they don't die? That's 3 glory points. And if a dwarf should die, every other player instantly loses half of their glory points, and if you are playing a campaign, that campaign comes to an immediate end. But I digress, I was talking about the event dice. The other event that is really exciting is the countdown. The party leader immediately loses 1 glory. If you want to be the leader, you get the perks, but you are also putting your neck on the chopping block. You then have to flip the top card of the goblin hunting deck and resolve the effects. This is so much fun. I'm not normally a big fan of doom clocks, but it works so well for this game. The idea of the dwarves racing through the caverns getting as much treasure as possible, with goblins hot on their heels, is evocative and exciting, and each hunting card you reveal helps to build a tense narrative. I particularly like the Cover Your Tracks card. Any dwarf going back to the cave entrance and spending an action will gain 2 glory and will get to add a hunting card to the deck as they throw the goblins off the scent. That sort of thing is just neat. For a generally lightweight and easygoing game, I was surprised how much tension there is when you get down to the final few hunting cards in the deck, and it's a genuinely concerning moment when the deck finally runs out, because the caverns are instantly flooded with goblins as they pour in from the entry tile to chase you down. At that point, it's time to get out as soon as possible. Having resolved the event dice, the dwarves each take a turn. They have 3 movement points and 1 action as standard, and they are allowed to split their movement up, for example moving 1 space, performing an action and then moving 2 more spaces. Available actions are attacking an adjacent monster or revealed obstacle, climbing out of a pit, but that instantly ends your turn, investigating an adjacent rock or cave token, rescuing a dwarf from an adjacent pit, which earns you a glory point, resting to discard 1 damage and then optionally spending a glory point to discard a 2nd damage, and running, which means moving 1 extra space. Additionally, there are abilities that don't require an action, like scooping up any revealed treasure, activating a magical healing crystal to revive yourself or an adjacent dwarf, jumping over a pit as part of your movement, or activating a skill or relic. The most common and most fun activity is investigating. You simply flip an adjacent rock token or cave tile to see what you have found. Cave tiles remain in play flipped face up, while the rocks are resolved and discarded unless they are an obstacle. As you remove rocks, you may gain access to other parts of the cavern. Investigating rocks in this manner may cause a cave-in, may reveal the rock is in fact a sleeping Stalagbite that wakes up hungry, or may uncover some gold, a gem, or a relic. Or the rock may simply be that, a rock, a plain, uninteresting stalagmite. Many of the rock counters have a question mark on the reverse. Reveal one of these and you need to draw an incident card. Again, something good may happen, you may find some gold or a relic, but it's just as likely, probably more likely, that something bad is going to go down, like a goblin lurker striking with a poisoned dagger from the shadows, or all the nearby stalagmites springing into life, revealing them to be sneaky stalagmites after all. Revealing a cave is much the same, but with more risk of finding something like a monster's lair, balanced with a greater chance of gaining glory by finding a secret passage, a way out of the caverns, or a new cavern to explore. When revealing a passage, you place a corridor segment and then a new cavern, filling the new cavern with randomly drawn caves and rocks as before. And I just have to point out this little feature. If your randomly expanding dungeon is creeping towards a table edge, don't panic. When you reveal a passage, instead of placing a regular corridor segment, use a cavern connector. Then place a matching cavern connector anywhere on the table you like and place your cavern. It's such a small thing, but not having to completely readjust the whole board to fit the available space is a lovely quality of life addition to the game. Just thinking about this sort of thing shows the designers are gamers first and know the kinds of challenges regular folk face when trying to find a suitable space to play a game. Of course, as your cavern expands, you will have to fight. Exploration is the heart of the game, the driving factor that pushes the adventure and the narrative. But combat cannot be overlooked. A dwarf can spend their action to whack an adjacent monster. They roll their beautiful custom dice, and the monster rolls their dice. The results are compared. On the dwarf dice, the results are a special, which inflicts 2 damage as standard but may also trigger special abilities and other effects, 2 damage, 1 damage, 1 damage and 1 save, and a fail. Monster dice have various combinations of these same results, but with unique symbols. All the different symbols may at first seem daunting, until you realise they all follow the same design principles. The special is always the creature's face, or a full body image if they don't really have a face as such. Hits are always represented by what that creature would hit you with: teeth, grasping suckers, claws or knives. Saves are always round symbols depicting either a shield or the natural texture of the creature's body, and fails are always blank. And I have to say again, these are lovely dice. Collectors should really enjoy these. Anyway, you can see this is basically Hero Quest combat. You are comparing hits to saves. If any hits get through, the target takes that much damage. If they take damage equal to their toughness, they are destroyed. If a dwarf kills a monster, they get glory points. Simple. But there are a couple of interesting wrinkles involving the special symbol. If you are attacking and you roll the special, you may be able to trigger extra abilities. Furthermore, if you roll a special and your opponent rolls a fail, you inflict a critical hit. Critical hits on monsters have different effects depending on the monster type. The monsters are always instantly killed, granting glory points as normal, but stalagmites are crushed, revealing gold or valuable gems. Creeping jeepers explode in a mess of poisonous ooze, inflicting 1 damage on anything adjacent, and red hook horrors screech, freezing other monsters in their tracks. A critical hit on a dwarf inflicts 2 damage in a one-off game, but if you are playing a campaign, the player instead draws a critical injury card and applies the effects. These add some lovely little twists to the combat. I think my favourite is the humiliating fail. You don't take any damage, but you end up looking like such a chump you lose 2 glory. When defending, a special symbol will cancel any attack, blocking all the damage from the attack roll and any bonus effects. Additionally, if the attacker rolls a fail while the defender rolls a special, the defender gets to make a free counterattack immediately. This instigates a new round of combat in which it is possible for another counterattack to occur. Finally, at any time, a dwarf can spend 1 glory point to re-roll their dice, and they can do this as many times as they like, as long as they have glory to burn. It's always nice to have ready access to dice mitigation, especially when you roll like I do and you're pretty certain all 6 sides of your dice are blank. After the dwarves have finished activating, all the monsters move in order of level and type, generally taking the shortest path possible to a dwarf. Then any monsters in range of a dwarf will attack. After that, we get another interesting part of the game, which can really ramp up the tension and plays well into that idea of a cooperative game with competitive elements. The dwarves will huddle around and consider the future of the expedition. Perhaps things are looking grim. There may be too many monsters on the board, not enough treasure, or maybe the goblin hunters are about to arrive. Whatever the reason, in this phase of the game, any player may request a vote to decide if the team should stay or go. Each player puts all their glory in one hand, then secretly moves as many glory points as they want into their other hand. Each glory point is 1 vote. Having done this, players hold out the hands containing their votes and announce whether they wish to stay or go. Votes are then revealed and tallied. If there were more votes to stay, the expedition continues. If there are more votes to go, the endgame is triggered. More on that in a moment. Regardless of the outcome, all the glory used for voting is discarded from play, and this is such a clever balancing mechanism, because obviously a dwarf with a lot of glory is more likely to decide it's time to go, and they will also have more sway over the vote as they have more glory to spend. But any glory they vote with is lost. So dwarves who are low on glory can bluff, maybe convince the leading player that they need to put more glory into votes than is really necessary. And if the dwarf with all the glory uses too much, suddenly they might not have the most glory anymore, and they may have screwed themselves. It's another lovely little moment of tension, where a player can become too confident and overstretch themselves, or play it far too safe, giving other players a chance to spend more time in the caverns to catch up with them. Assuming the dwarves have decided not to leave, the player with the most glory becomes the party leader and starts a new turn, rolling the event dice. This cycle will continue until the dwarves do vote to leave, the goblin hunting party arrives, a dwarf dies, or the 5th and final cavern is discovered in the last game of a campaign. In all cases, the end game begins. The party leader selects 1 revealed exit on the board, or the entrance, although this is generally a bad idea because that is where the goblins will appear, and the selected exit becomes the escape route. From now on, each turn the dwarves must move towards this exit in an attempt to get out of the cavern. Each dwarf that doesn't finish their turn at least 1 space closer to the exit loses a glory, which again is a nice little risk and reward element, as dwarves can choose to stay in the caverns longer to investigate more caves or rocks, but at the risk of losing glory in the process. There is also bonus glory up for grabs for getting out of the cavern before your friends. Once all the dwarves are out, you tot up your treasure and glory, and the player with the highest score wins. At this point, you have 2 choices. You can say good game, shake hands and run off to sit on your pile of gold swigging mead. Alternatively, you can continue your adventure as a campaign. If you do, each dwarf recovers 1 health, and can spend additional glory to recover more health at the cost of 1 glory per health. Treasure is then banked safely to go towards the expedition's grand total. Next, all unused skills and relics are refreshed, and each dwarf is dealt 2 new skills. They can keep 1, or discard them both for a toughness boost, although toughness can never go higher than 9. The role of the party leader goes to whoever won the previous game. When you start your next game, the level you were on previously and the exit you used to leave that level will determine the size of the goblin hunting party deck, as well as which level of the caverns you are now exploring. For example, if you were on level 1 and you left by a staircase that went down 2 levels, you have made good ground and can add 2 cards to the hunting party deck. However, you are now on level 3, home to the powerful creeping jeepers. Better watch out. And that is pretty much all you need to know. Stalagbite is very much a simple, straightforward game. The sheer joy of it comes from that sense of true exploration, of uncovering a new cavern, finding a rare magical crystal, or pushing your luck to reveal 1 more cave even though the goblin hunters have arrived. As I was playing, I realised this game reminded me very much of Lost Valley of the Dinosaurs, a game I loved in my youth and a game that I will be featuring on the channel soon. It has that same idea of a group of adventurers going into a dangerous place and trying to collect treasure while bad things are happening. And in both games there is a sort of timer. In Stalagbite it's the hunting party, in Lost Valley of the Dinosaurs it's the volcano. Another game that sprang to mind as I played was Dungeon Quest. Stalagbite is not as brutal or hilariously unfair, you won't die instantly from a bad dice roll or unfavourable card draw, but the spirit of the game is very similar. You head into the caverns and you explore caves and rock formations, often with no clue of what you will find. Lots of bad stuff will happen, sometimes some good stuff, and there is a very pure and honest sense of joy that comes from exploring, of putting on your big dwarf pants, seeing what happens next, and laughing at your own misfortune or the misfortune of others. It's not a manically chaotic game though. Some things may be beyond your control, but you can mitigate dice rolls with glory, you have access to skills and relics that can help you, and often you will get to sense rocks and caves to get an idea of whether you should investigate them. There are also some incredibly clever balancing mechanisms baked into the gameplay to stop any one player getting too far ahead of the others. The player with the most glory becomes the party leader. This confers advantages like going first in the round and breaking ties on votes, but it also puts you squarely in the firing line. Going first in the round will mean you are regularly going to be the one that uncovers new dangers. Some events will target the leader first, and the leader is responsible for rolling the event dice, which can often result in losing glory. It's all just really well thought out. And it's fun. The goblin hunting mechanism is brilliant. It stops games dragging on too long, adds tension, generates events, and creates new situations for the dwarves to overcome. Once the goblins arrive, the game really starts to feel different. First it was a race for treasure, now it's a race to survive. Goblins are tough, with 3 wounds each, and they are just as capable as the dwarves. They can move 3 spaces per turn and make an attack, or if they have nothing to attack they will run 4 spaces instead. They close the ground in the cramped corridors at a terrifying pace. The only saving grace is they are no keener on the monsters that dwell in the caves than you are, and they will happily murder anything that gets in their way. Replayability is also off the charts. Sure, the scenario is always the same, but every game throws up new challenges. Your available relics and skills, the critical wounds inflicted on you, the placement of caves and rocks, the cavern cards which add a different special rule each time you play, the incident cards that generate events, and the goblin hunting deck. There are even 6 different types of ongoing poison effects that you may be unlucky enough to suffer if a goblin lurker sticks you with its knife. Even just adjusting the player count gives vastly different experiences. A solo run with 1 dwarf against the world feels much more daring and dangerous than an expedition with a company of 6 dwarves. As a bonus, this edition of the game also includes a mini expansion, the Lava Cavern. It's revealed when you find the lava passage and presents you with a new type of environment where the risks and rewards are greater and there are brand new events to encounter. Honestly, I cannot say enough good things about Stalagbite. I thought it looked like a fun game, but it has blown me away. I do like to be as balanced as possible in my reviews, so I have been sitting here trying to think of any negatives, and nothing much is coming to mind. So, yeah, I thought the rules book could be a little cleaner in how information was presented. I would have loved to have seen some artwork on the skill cards. The secret passageway tiles aren't always that easy to spot, so I usually mark them with another playing piece. And I wish my dwarf dice didn't have 6 blank faces. That's it. I love this game. Of all the games new to me this year that I have been lucky enough to play, this has been the most fun. And if you think it looks like fun, you can get your own copy right now. There's a link in the video description to the Midlam Miniatures website where you can order a copy. But also, if you are going to the UK Games Expo 2024, you can meet the team in person and buy a copy from their booth. I'll put all the information to help you find them in the video description as well. And I think that's about it from me for now. Thank you to Midlam Miniatures for sending this game for review, and thank you for watching. If you like this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone, bye bye.